Cool, hello, hello. So welcome, and killer that you're all here, so many people on a freezing cold January afternoon or evening or something. But wicked, thanks for coming along, and it's going to be a really cool evening. So before I go on, I guess I'll say what's going to happen and introduce the people responsible for this event. So my name's Merlyn, and I'm an Ableton certified trainer, and I teach up at DM at the conservatory around the corner. And along with myself making this event, we have Martin and Mia from Radar, and Jesper from Futureware, who is Ableton's distributor in the Nordics. So Jesper, Martin, Mia, thanks to all of them for helping make that happen, and let's get started. So I'm going to do a seminar for about an hour on Ableton Live 10, which I'm sure most of you know has just come out in beta and will be out pretty soon as a public release. So that will take about an hour, and while I'm talking, you're very welcome to just stick up your hands and say what the hell are you talking about and ask questions. And afterwards we'll also do a quick Q&A if there's anything that's been bugging you. And you can of course grab me at some point in the evening if you want to know a little bit more about something else. So after we do that, we're going to have an against the clock competition with which you'll be doing some live production for a short amount of time, and then we'll all be voting on what we thought was the coolest production. The winner of this will get a license for Ableton Live 10 Suite, and as runners-up will get tickets for good concerts at Radar and also some goodies along with that. So we'll do a bit more information on that when it happens. And then at the end, we're going to have a link jam. So we've got a mixer set up in here, and we also have another room in one of the dressing rooms set up so that we can make a network and get you guys jamming and making some music. And again, me and Martin and Jesper will be around to answer questions and plug things in and help with tech stuff. So it should be a really cool night, and yeah, thanks very much for coming out. So let's get down to the cool stuff. And this is Ableton Live 10. And there's a lot of stuff to get through, and I won't be able to cover all of the new features because there's quite a lot of them. The way I'm going to approach this is make probably not the best piece of music you've ever heard right here, and then through that I should be able to show you some of the most important things that have come with the latest update. So cool, that's what's going to be happening today. So before we actually look at the program itself, I'm going to introduce you quickly to a few things that came with Live 10 in the shape of the sounds and sound packs. And I'll just scroll down here. So yeah, Live 10, as well as being a new piece of software and having some great features and an integration of Macs, comes with some really, really interesting and useful libraries of sound, and a lot of work was put into this in Berlin in curating these collections. And they call them curated collections because they're talking more about kind of vibe and history of electronic music rather than being EDM drums or particular 303 synths. So I'll be using these sounds as we go along so you get a bit of a chance to hear them. But yeah, we've got build and drop, glitch and watch, drive and glow, punch and tilt, skitter and step, and chop and swing. So the first thing I recommend you do if you upgrade to Live 10 is to download these packs. They're in your account. They're really, really interesting, and I'm really enjoying using them. They've all got a bit more character than you might find in other pieces of software. And along with that, we've got a few packs of essential instruments. We've got a new electric keyboards pack, and this has sampled things like the Fender Rhodes and the Wurlitzer, to make some really, really nice and playable patches. And on top of that, we got some synthesizers, some drums, and a drum booth, which is a collection of very, very dry acoustic drums for you to put effects and layering on. So unlike the stuff that we've had before, this is really designed for integrating into whatever style you're already making. So really, really interesting and exciting packs. So cool. Wicked. So to start off with, let's have a look at Skitter and Step, which is one of those packs I just mentioned. And I'm going to go into my packs here and scroll down to that. And I'm going to start off, as most of us do, with getting some drums down. So let's just have a quick preview of some of these. And I've decided before I'm going to use this Microtuner Kit. So as you heard, very kind of dubsteppy, drum and bassy kind of feeling to these packs, and yeah, a lot of the synthesizers that come with it, they've got this same kind of maybe like 90s, early 1000s vibe to them. So cool, we got a pretty loud drum kit. and yeah, very playable, and obviously I'm using a push 2 here, but you could be using whatever you're using in your own studios. And I'm just going to go ahead and tap in a beat. So the first thing I want to introduce you to is this function at the top that you won't have seen before. This is called Caption. So I'm just going to press this button, and you'll see that not only has it recorded what I just played in, but it's also discovered the tempo that I played it in. And I find that really interesting because for me, I don't know if you get this, I spend a lot of time playing around, getting something I like, finding a sound that I want to use, and getting a riff. But then when I go and press record, it all kind of goes down the toilet and is never quite that feeling I had at the beginning. So even though this seems like a really simple idea, and you do find this in other places, other software, the way that it kind of latches onto the tempo you played in really, for me, I'm really picking up this workflow of not kind of thinking record anymore and just kind of messing around and then capturing something that I like. So I'm just going to crop this so that we've got a nice little loop here. And actually, it's a little bit dubstep. I'm going to give that another go. And I'm not the best finger drummer on earth, so I'm also going to cheat a little bit and quantize that. And I think I might overdub it as well with a couple of hits. Sweet, so that's Capture, and it took me a little while to get used to this. I've been playing with this for a few months, but yeah, I'm really enjoying not having to kind of mentally prepare myself to make music and just kind of capture what I'm doing. So moving along, I'm going to introduce you to one of the new devices that comes with Live 10, and this is called the Drum Bus. And I'll just zoom in on that. So yeah, Drum Bus very much does what it says on the tin. It's got a lot of effects built in that are really appropriated for drums and drum submixes. And just a little orientation. We got some drive. And that's got a few different models. So we got some nice analog modeled juicy distortion. And also I've got this crunch, which adds a bit of distortion and saturation to just the high end. So we're just kind of getting a little bit of sparkle in the hats and the snare. We've got a dampening, so this takes a little bit off the high end, but it's not quite an EQ, it's dampening. So this can be a lot more musical than if you just put massive EQ cuts on your drums. And then below it, we've got the thing that's really, really exciting for me, because I've been wanting this in live for a long time. We've got a Transient Designer. So the deal with this is that the mid and high frequencies of the input, the transients are going to be boosted up. And transients, if you don't know, it's the sharp attack of the sounds, so particularly things like hi-hats, snares, and percussion. So I'll just play around with this and you'll hear what it's doing. And yeah, that's really, really useful for just kind of bringing out that snappiness without really going to town with some crazy processing. And I'm using this on a drum bus now, but you can really get good results with vocals and basses and leads and really anything that you need to kind of get a little bit of bite out of, but you don't necessarily want to compress or limit. So yeah, really, really nice to have that finally. And last but not least, we've got this awesome boom function. And so what boom does is, using this little go button here, it finds out the note of your kick, and then it adds boom to it. So it accentuates the bass notes and the sub. So we can solo it to get an idea. And pressing it, you'll see that the frequency moved to 49. So that's the note it can hear. And now I can add a bit of boom. And it's quite extreme, but you can hear that's got a lot of sub out of this drum. I can take the decay down as well to... But I think that kick's already got a crazy amount of sub to it anyway, so I'm going to take that off. But this is really, really good for getting a drum beat or a recording you've made that doesn't really, really punch through, and just kind of adding this layer of sub to it. And again, I'm using a really electronic kit, but this is great on acoustic stuff because it really just gives it a bit of oomph without having to go about layering it and using other techniques like that. So the world's best drum beat just got even better, and I'm very, very happy with that. But yeah, that's Drum Bus, and I really recommend when you get the beta or you upgrade that you experiment on different voices, so synths and vocals, really useful. And now we got a drum beat. I guess the next logical step is to get some bass going on. So in order to do this, I'm going to introduce you to one of the new devices, and if you've been following the social media stuff, then this has been really, really hyped up because it is bloomin' fantastic. So this is Wavetable, and for those of you who don't know, Wavetable Synthesis it's kind of like taking a very, very small sample that you call a wavetable, and using that as your oscillation source. So instead of using just a sine wave or a square wave like you might in any subtractive synth, this actually allows you to morph between the different sounds in this wavetable. So I'll just demonstrate quickly. Here you can see we're starting with a sine, but as I take this position knob up, we're scanning through the four basic shapes of synthesis: sine, triangle, square, and saw. So wavetable synthesis has been around since, I think, the late 80s, if not the early 90s, and I'm sure a lot of you have used things like Massive or Serum before, and this is Ableton's answer to that. And I think it's a really, really interestingly put together synth, and it's really, really easy to modulate and to make some very complicated things happen really easily. So we're going to walk through very quickly the different parts, but it's quite a deep synthesizer, so I really recommend you go mad and spend some good time getting under the hood of this, because you can really make a lot. So to make things a bit prettier, I'm going to press this little button here, and we're going to expand the view. So now we can see all of the controls of the synthesizer, which again is really, really handy. And to start off, we have two oscillators. So this first one we've been listening to. And I'm just going to turn on number 2. And I'm going to go down and choose a different wavetable. So I'm going to have 2 playing at the same time. And as you can see, there's lots of categories. I'm going to go for complex. And within each category, there's loads of wavetables, so hundreds and hundreds of different things to explore. And you'll hear from these, you get some very interesting textures. And we're going to go for that one for now. So also we've got this excellent visual interface where we can kind of get an idea of the wavetable we're using. This is a spectrographic image. So this is showing you both the harmonics and the timing of the file that we've loaded in. So as well as this, we've got some effects. And these effects here, number 1 and 2, they're not like audio effects. This is ways of manipulating this little sample, this wavetable. And we can do lots of different things for it. We can add FM. And we can go down to classic and add things like sync. And you can see how the image changes to give you what is, pretty abstract, to give you some kind of idea of what you're doing to this sound. And I'm going to go down to modern, and I'm going to play with the warp a bit. So absolutely hours of fun, and of course these effects will have very different sounds depending what wavetable we've chosen. So over here we've got 3 envelopes. Number 1 here, amp. This controls the amplitude or volume of the sound. So I've just taken a bit of the release off. And I'm going to give it full sustain. And the other 2 envelopes can be assigned to anything you like. And of course we've got some LFOs as well. So like most things in live, we've got re-trigger, we can click the notes and have rhythmic movement. And yeah, these are our modulation sources. Down here we've got filters, so 2 that can be in parallel or serial or splits between the different oscillators. And I'm just going to keep it simple and use this one low pass. We can also model this like all the analog models that was released in Live 9.5. So I'm going to go down to the MS-20 emulation. And something I forgot to say is we've also got this sub oscillator. I'm not going to use it because there's loads of sub here already. But we can add octaves below it, and that can be from a sine wave to a saw wave. But yeah, I think we're good without that for now. So as you can see, you can really stack these sounds up, and you can transpose these oscillators and have really, really, really big patches. But that's all well and good, but this here, this modulation matrix, this is where the fun is for me, because it's a really kind of different way of approaching modulation. If you use Massive, you'll know that you can kind of drag certain parameters onto other parameters and kind of make a really meta situation. And I think that works great in Massive, but this is a bit more inspired by kind of wavetable synthesizers, particularly Roland ones from the 90s. So the way this works is you click on any parameter in Wavetable, and I'm going to click here on frequency, and you'll see that this dialog changes, so resonance or frequency. And from here, you can dial in how much these things at the top will modulate that parameter. So very simply, I'll say I want the LFO1 to control the filter frequency. Cool. So let's make that a bit more interesting. I'm going to take the Reese trigger off LFO2, click on this position here on my second oscillator, and maybe I'll also play with that warp that we were having a look at. And sweet. So obviously you could spend hours doing this and you could really modulate anything to anything. As far as I know, this is kind of infinite. You can keep adding different parameters and kind of making a very meta and uncontrollable situation. You've also got things like velocity, note number, pitch bend, so you can really go to town. And finally, I'm going to turn this to mono. I'm going to add a bit of glide. And you've got a load of unison modes. So I'm sure if you've used similar synths, you'll know that this is going to spread your sound out and make it very, very wide. Sweet, and the amount there. So I know that was probably a massive blast of information for a synth that many of you may have not seen before, but really there's so much to go through with this. So this is just kind of an overview, but get the demo and play around with the presets that are really well made. And yeah, this is really, really, for me, an interesting addition, because I've been using Serum myself for ages and ages. And while they're very different and they do different things, and one isn't necessarily better than the other, having this natively with a really low CPU hit is really good for me, because I don't have to kind of watch my CPU dial up here and be careful with what I do. It's really light on the system considering how intense it can be. So I'm just going to get a glass of water, which reminds me that I was supposed to say the bar is open, even though it looks closed. So if you guys are feeling thirsty, you're very welcome to just get up and get a drink, and I won't be offended or think you're leaving. So no worries at all. Cool. While that's going on, I'm just going to record a bass line in. Cool. And again, I kind of suck at finger drumming, so let's quantize that. Before we move on, there's a couple of parameters I totally forgot to tell you about that I'm going to record a bit with now. This is time and amount, and if you're used to using things like sampler and operator, then you'll be familiar with these parameters. Time will take all of your envelopes and LFOs and all of your time-based elements of the synth and kind of act as a master for it. So have a listen when I change it up and down. And then the thing I love about this is that once you've got a kind of idea, and at this point I'm thinking, maybe that doesn't sound amazing, or maybe it could be better, you can just kind of scroll through all these wavetables and get different results from the same patch. pretty hard to mix when the speakers are in front of you, but it's all gravy. We'll move on from there. But yeah, really fun synth to work with. So, right at the beginning, we were having a little look at all the different sounds and packs that come with it, and I'm going to play with the electronic keyboards because I'm a bit of a sucker for things like a Fender Rhodes. And yeah, let's just find that pack up here, and let's add a bit of Fender Rhodes to our composition. So you can see I've got a suitcase piano, which is a Rhodes, a tone wheel organ, and a Wurlitzer. And I'm going to just go for this basic sound here. And right off the bat, it's really, really kind of got some kind of realism to it, I think. Really responsive. And yeah, we seem to accidentally been going into dubstep world, so I'm going to keep it dubby and record something in a minor key. And to go with this, since we're going into dub world, we're going to have a look at another device that's called Echo. So we'll run through this in a minute, but to start with, I'm just going to record in with the drums some kind of skanky chop things. Sweet. And yes, let's quickly quantize that and solo it. So already it sounds pretty interesting, I think, for an Echo. And this is really designed, I think, inspired at least by the Roland Space Echo. It kind of has a similar vibe, a similar layout, and that's a really good thing because it's an amazing piece of gear that's kind of getting quite hard to get hold of. So let's have a little look at what we've got to play with. So a lot of these controls will be really familiar to anyone that's used a delay before. We've got the timing, we can synchronize it or have it in milliseconds. Here we can choose between straight notes, triplets, dotted notes, or 16th notes, and we can have that out of sync. Here's the absolute killer thing for me. We finally have something with feedback that goes over 100%. So listen to what I mean. And yeah, it's kind of going to get loud, but so it's wonderfully analog modeled. It really distorts in this kind of warm, kind of tape echo kind of way. But yeah, it can totally blow your eardrums as well. So you've got to be a little bit careful. This little D here also distorts the input signal with a similar analog model distortion. And we've got a filter here so we can filter out our repeats. We also have a reverb. We can place it anywhere we want in the chain and control the delay. Cool. And here we've got a modulation section. This can get quite crazy. We can modulate the timing of the delay. And we can modulate the filter of the delay. And we can also add an envelope to the filter. And just over here, we can be in stereo. We can have a ping pong delay bouncing between left and right. And interestingly, we can control the mid or the side. And we can have the center signal delaying at different times to the side which would be an absolute nightmare to put together manually. So it's really nice to have that. Really works nicely on vocals, to have kind of a short delay in the middle and a kind of long echo on the outsides. So yeah, we also have a character section, and I'll come back here in a bit because this has got some really interesting uses. But very simply, we got some wobble, which kind of can be very subtle moving of the tape. If you imagine this is a tape delay, so really crazy noise like that. We have a simulation of the noise of a tape delay going round, this kind of hum that you might recognize. Which kind of like using a bit of vinyl crackle on your productions, can just add a little bit of dirt to kind of fill in the silence. It's really nice to have. We've also got a gate and ducking, but we'll come back to that, like I said, in a little bit. So yeah, all in all, a really kind of characterful device. And I think this is a great way of looking at all of the stuff that's come in Live 10. There's a lot of things that are kind of a bit dirtier than we're used to, a bit more characterful, a bit more kind of analog in sound. And I think it's really nice to have that in the environment. So yeah, that's Echo. And if you like dub like me, then you're going to get very friendly with this device. So now we got some keys and we got a bass, and I'm going to go ahead and make a lead sound to add to our arrangement. And I've actually prepared one up here. And now I'm just going to do a terrible job at recording something in. So I quite like that sound. I picked it out before I did this demo and thought it was kind of, yeah, the kind of sound I'd like. But I think it could be a little bit dirtier and have a bit more oomph. It doesn't really cut through this really loud mix I'm making. So yeah, let's have a look at another device. This one is called Pedal. And pedal is very much what it says on the tin. It's modelled on guitar pedals, and classic ones at that. And I get the feeling, although this is just my imagination right now, this OD is modelled after a Boss OD1, an overdrive pedal. I feel like the distortion is modelled after a Rat pedal, and the fuzz is modelled after a Big Muff. But this is just from my ears. I play guitar as well, and it kind of reminds me a lot. So let's look at this fuzz, and if any of you know about kind of grungy, fuzzy tones that use the Big Muff, you might kind of recognize this style. So very, very chunky, and whereas the overdrive one's a little bit more subtle. Cool. And yeah, I'm going to keep it on this fuzz. And I think it really, really kind of crunches the sound nicely. And I'm using this on a lead, which is, I guess, the most obvious choice. But yeah, it's pretty killer when you use it in parallel with drums. You have a dry, wet control here. You can just add a little bit of kind of harmonic fuzziness to things without it really sounding too digital or aliasy. So it's a very kind of warm and friendly device. This button, you can protect the sub, so it only lets things above the sub level, so above 100 hertz through. And here we can also kind of play with the tone and the quality of the distortion. This little button tells us, do we want low mids, mid mids, or high mids? So let's just So yeah, really simple, playable, and you know, it doesn't get much deeper than that, but it just really kind of fits into a lot of things mix-wise. And yeah, I really enjoy playing around with that. And of course, if you play guitar or instruments, this can be really nice to add to the end of your chain. So yeah, that's another one of major new devices and new things that come with this update. So cool. Beyond here, yeah, we've got a few things here, and since I have a vague plan of what I'm doing, I'm going to scroll through some wavetable presets, and I'm going to find like a B to my lead. So I've got two sounds to play with as I keep composing this track. And let's look at Synth Leads, and I want something that contrasts it a little bit. So I'm going to just copy this over, this MIDI clip of my lead I made over to this new sound. And knock it up an octave. Cool. So I'm going to group these little leads. And I'm going to start taking this over into the arrangement view. And now we've had a look at some of the sounds and some of the effects that we've got to play with. We're going to look at a few of the workflow improvements, because as well as all these extra gadgets and gizmos, there's been some massive overhauls in working in arrangement view and working with audio and working with MIDI. So let's see if we can have a look at some of the top things. So I'm going to select all of those and take it over to here and drop it in. And now we have my composition as before. Sweet. So let's call this group lead and solo it. And now we're going to have a look at something that kind of blew my mind and I think is really super useful. So with Live 10, we now have multi-clip MIDI editing. So by this I mean we can now select really as many clips as you can think and view them, all the MIDI information in the same view. So I've selected both of those leads, which are kind of identical, one's an octave above. And you can see here, if I click at the top, the color of the clip, we can select and work with different clips. So now I've selected the orange clip, which was my second lead. And I can just click up here on the brown, and all of a sudden the orange clip is deactivated, and I've got the brown one to play with. So let's play around with this a little bit. So something you get a lot when you've got lots of voicings in arrangement is a kind of sense of call and response. So this could be a bit fiddly in the past. You'd have to go into a clip, change things, go out, go into a new one, blah, blah, blah. But now I can see everything. I can get a really good overview of what I'm composing and how the different pieces of music interact with each other, which is really, I think, very important to have an idea of as you're kind of jamming and writing patterns to make it easier for yourself later. So I'm going to make it really simple. I'm going to have one lead playing one bar and the next lead playing the next. But of course you could take this much further and make it very complicated. So starting with the brown, I'm just going to delete this second bar and everything in the fourth bar and the sixth bar and the final bar. And then clicking on the orange, I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to delete everything from the third, the first, the fifth, and the seventh. So that was very simple, but maybe I'll add a few notes here and there so that there's a bit more call and response. So now we're in this orange one. Maybe we're going to add something here. And I'll have a note responding to that in my brown clip, just below it. And on. And I'm using this in a lead situation, but this would work just as well if you had a whole bunch of drum rhythms together, or some percussion or other things that you want to get some kind of grouping to, that you want the music to kind of answer to itself. So this is a really, really cool feature, and it's kind of taken me a while to really get my head around using it and get out of the old habit. But yeah, especially at this point in a composition where you've got some clips, but you kind of haven't got your song yet, you've just got some ideas. It's a really good way of trimming things up and making sure one note isn't playing over another, or you don't have any disharmony or anything like that. So yeah, really cool addition. And as you can see here now, we have two clips that are kind of similar but different and speak to each other somehow. Before I go on, is there any questions at this point? Is there anything that you're like, what the hell are you talking about? Nate. Cool. That's really, really good to know. So, yes, I said that I'd get back to echo, and it has a few extra features that can come in useful, and there's one that really is rocking my world at the moment, and that's this ducking. Now, let's just put this echo device on this lead group and press play. Really messy, and in the case of this, I do want this line to have some space. I want to give it a bit of echo. I want it to kind of fill out my composition a bit, and I really want it to kind of, yeah, sound in a different room. But as we've just heard, just slapping an echo on the top kind of leads to a bit of chaos. It gets a bit out of control. Can't really hear the difference between the note and the echo, blah, blah, blah. It's quite tough on the ear. And in the past, you'd have to go through some kind of quite complicated routines with a send channel or having a group with different chains to kind of get the echo to duck out of the way of my lead lines. And that's what I want. I want this effect to only come out when the lead isn't playing, so it just acts as like a tail. So yeah, you can do this really easily now with this ducking feature. And the threshold, this part here, this says when the input is below this number, then the effect of the echo can fade in, and the speed it fades in is defined by this release. So in this instance, I'm just going to take it down quite far, and now you should hear the difference. I'll take it off again for A-Bing purposes. Cool. Sweet. So yeah, really, really nice feature. And again, like really, really usable in this case where you've got lots going on and you kind of want to get that space into your mix, but everything kind of gets really, really crazy when you try. So really, really handy. And yeah, now we're getting somewhere towards having a bit of composition, and maybe we're going to kind of stretch this all out a little bit. So I'm going to do the mortal sin of just duplicating everything a whole bunch of times and say that's my composition. And just with my eyes, I'm going to say, well, I probably don't want my kick drum and my snare at the beginning of this. And maybe I don't want my bass at the beginning, and then we're going to have a little drop. Maybe we'll just have the lead come in kind of later on. And have a little break here. And then... Cool. There we have it, an arrangement. And obviously this isn't going to sound great, but now we can have a look at the new features in 10 that allows me to work in arrangement view in a much more streamlined way. So yeah, where to start? Let's just consult the notes. Cool, yeah. At this point, when I compose music, I often hit a real wall. I'm really, really good at, well, I have a lot of fun at least, in just making sounds and making drum beats and loops and blah, blah, blah. And, you know, for me, that's kind of the good bit about composition and production. But then when I kind of get into arrangement view, I often kind of lose that beginning impetus. I lose my inspiration because I start browsing, looking for things. I start thinking it needs this and it needs white noise and impacts and all kinds of things. And I think that turning on that part of your brain, the kind of analytical librarian inside you, can kind of get in the way of this flow that we all talk about, that we all want to get into. And I find this really destructive. I'm sure loads of you would agree in the audience here that I've got tons of projects that are at this point, but not so many that get that much further. And that's really a block for a lot of people. So Live 10 really answers this with these collections at the top. And you might have noticed this isn't something you've seen in Live 9 or earlier versions. Let's have a little zoom in and see what's going on. So in Live 10, you have these 7 different colors that you can assign to things in your library. And these things could be a folder, it could be a sample, it could be an instrument, it could be an effects rack that you've made. It can be really anything that you can find in your places. And not only that, you can decide what they're called by renaming them, and you can also show and hide them. So it's kind of a way to make groups of the different billions of folders in your library, of things you've downloaded and bought and found, field recordings you've made. Because a lot of the time it's quite hard to make a library, right? You kind of use, I don't know about you, but I've spent many times going, you know, how do I do this? Do I do it by genre? Do I have a drums folder with all my drum packs? Do I have a folder with all the packs I've bought? It can be a real pain in the bum, and it can really get in the way of creativity. So this is a great way to answer it. And for example, this flying thing here, if I press 2, you'll see that I've removed the orange color. So next time I go into this collection, that's gone. And I can press 2 again to keep it in. And you can go all the way, you know, through anything, and you can add more than one color to anything. So you might have sounds that fit into many of your categories, and you can kind of make a very complicated schema, but it's personal, and that's the thing. It's not, you're not having to set into someone else's logic. This is, you can make this however you want. So I've chosen a few things that I've been working with. Demo for stuff like this when I'm doing demos or projects. Incidental sounds, this is kind of what I was talking about. Explosions and white noise and all the stuff that isn't really that interesting but really essential to getting some kind of movement into your piece. I've got some of my favourite bass movements and one-shots and a folder. Interesting stuff that just kind of, you know, when you're browsing you think, oh, I could make a song out of that, but, you know, that's a distraction. Sub, world, and glitch, which kind of describes the music I make quite well, I guess. But yeah, you can make it your own, and you can change it, and you can change the name, and, you know, really develop your own library. So for this case, I want to throw on some incidental sounds into this arrangement and not end up browsing. So here I've got impacts. Let's just grab something. And kind of copy that across a few places. And maybe I'll want some kind of riser. And obviously I do recommend you listen to stuff unlike what I'm doing, but you know, time is of the essence and we all got to win stuff. So that's that. And let's also have some kind of falling wheel sound. And then you've got all the essentials to EDM right there. So 8 bars, boom. Probably going to sound terrible, but without kind of breaking my flow of making this piece of music, I've got these kind of essentials in there, and I'm still feeling creative. I'm not kind of gone into library mode and started making my own stuff and things. And it's really good to get into this habit of using these, kind of doing sound design, putting it into some kind of order with these collections, and then you've always got something to just go straight to and chuck into your arrangements. So here we've got actually we're gonna do better than that, aren't we? Yeah, smell like it. Come on. Oh, no. Sweet. So that's collections, and really kind of really simple thing, really. But the more you use it, the more you think, damn it, I really have needed this for a very, very long time. And that really sums up my experience with Live 10. There's so many things I didn't realize I needed that I really did need, and that just make things faster for me. So let's call this group Effects. And now we've got some fascinating sounds to play with. Sweet. So any questions at this point? We'll push on. So we've got browser collections. Oh, and something that, again, a really small and handy thing, you can now select a clip in arrangement view and use your keyboard arrows to move it around. Again, didn't really know I knew that. I didn't really realize that I needed that, but that's really, really handy, especially if you do a lot of kind of sound design based stuff and have very complicated projects with a lot of audio. It can be really good to just shuffle stuff around and not get repetitive strain injury in your index finger. So that can move up and down. You can kind of navigate around using the up and down arrows and the left and right. And that's a really refreshing way to just kind of tidy up your arrangement. So I'm really happy about that. And another little thing. Right now we can't see everything I'm doing because we've zoomed in. I can just press S. Oh, no, I can't. And my keyboard's gone funny because it's got the Midi keyboard up here. Yay. And S collapses everything. So in the instance that you're really lost and you've got 10 billion tracks and you just need a quick overview, S, and you just get a kind of everything collapse so you can see your arrangement as a pattern like this. So that's super handy. Now I'm going to add a little bit of percussion to my track, and I'm going to go into some of the packs that we were talking about, and we've had a look at this skitter and step, and it's got some cool kind of bass music inspired sounds, and this time I'm going to have a look for something else. I'm going to go for punch and tilt, and I'm going to go into the samples and the loops and the drum loops and find some percussion. So I'll take that one, and I'll stretch that out here. And maybe another one, just so we got some busy kind of high-end stuff happening. And I'm going to put these into a group and call it percussion or perk. And also I'm just going to grab this sidechain compressor that I used on my wavetable and put that on this group so it ducks out of the way of my kick. That's all well and good, but here is gold. I've got a group and I've got a track, and I can once again press Command G or Control G on a PC, and I've grouped the group into a group, and you can just keep doing that. So now you can take whole groups of material and neatly fold it away so that instead of having drums and percussion and other parts all over my arrangement, I just have this one drums supergroup. So it's very, very simple, but really, really useful workflow enhancement. And now if I solo this, So cool, groups within groups, and yeah, really useful for just keeping stuff under control and not getting totally swamped by having information everywhere, because as I'm sure many of you have found, this is ideal, what we're looking at here, no matter how complicated your project gets. To be able to see everything as an arrangement like this in one screen is vital to keeping control of where your music's going and what direction it's taking. So it really, really helps you just keep an overview of things and kind of maybe approach your mix more in stems, even if they're not actually stems, they're just groups of groups. So super, super useful there. So yeah, I'm gonna carry on arranging this, or if that's even possible at this point, but something we haven't got yet that's essential to any arrangement is changes over time, which we call automation. And you might notice that, let's go actually into this percussion. No, let's go into my keyboard. So you might notice that you're used to clicking on a parameter and a line coming up that you can automate with points. And that isn't happening. I'm clicking on my sends, nothing's happening, and my volume. That's because Ableton Live 10 has introduced a new mode, which we call automation mode. And this is accessed by pressing A on your keyboard, or by this blue box that's up near the automation locking. So pressing A toggles between these two modes. And again, this took me a little bit of time to get used to, because I was kind of set in my ways from working with Live 9 for a while. But now it's here, it's fantastic, because I can have like really complicated chains of automation. Let's just, for example's sake, add a few here, all with their own composition and lines and everything, and just pressing A collapses that and gets it out of the way. So again, really, really handy to kind of be able to get an idea of what's happening and then go deeper into something if you really want to. So in this case, I'm going to add a filter. And I want to fade in this filter at the beginning of this track so that my kind of skanky keyboard kind of fades in with this low pass. So I'm going to click here, and as you can see, this automation now snaps to my grid, which is another very simple but so useful feature. If you don't want that, you can hold down Command or Control on a PC and move it around as we used to be able to. But yeah, having this snap to a grid can be so good in kind of making these very controlled lines. So here I'm also going to maybe add a bit of reverb at the end. And now if we play back, really heavy. Sweet. So yeah, I can access this information just by pressing a key, and again, I can keep my automation snapping to my grid and without it kind of being off. And this can be really handy for like little mistakes that I used to make when I was kind of drawing in like this, and perhaps I wasn't quite getting to the end of the bar, and you'd get a kind of click or a pop because of filters moving super fast because you weren't very accurate. But now this really tidies it up, and really nice that I can also not do that and move it around freely. So a really nice kind of lifestyle enhancement that just kind of makes things a bit easier to quickly get down some ideas. So yeah, that's the new way to work with automation. Now, another little thing, just before we wrap up, and we could spend a lot more time looking at all the features, but is something that they've called Midi note chasing. Now, here's a really common problem for me. I've got a 16-bar, like, rising sound, this boo thing that we've got going on. And I want to do some kind of edit at the end. Maybe I want it to kind of turn into noise or drop down in pitch. And I'm sure you've all been here, right? We have to go to the beginning of the 16-bar clip, press play, sit there trying not to go on Facebook for 15 bars and then listen to what we did in that last bar. And we can't just drop in. So MIDI note chasing gets rid of this problem. So here I've got a MIDI note, and before, if I started playing live here, we wouldn't hear that note. It would wait until the next note, because it would wait for a note-on signal from the MIDI file. However, now I can just play here, and it will drop in to that part instantly. So really, really kind of detailed stuff, but so useful. And so, you know, once again, if we're talking about losing the flow, like something that kills it for me is just kind of waiting around to listen to some minute detail that I've changed, and then eventually it didn't work, so I have to do something else and then wait another 15 bars. And this can really take a lot of time and really kind of take the wind out of your sails. So I think this is a really, really great addition, especially with things like risers or long pads or long bass notes, that you can just drop straight into the bit that you want to hear, and you can hear that played back instantly. So it's a really nice little, time-saving tip. Cool. So, one last little thing of workflow. Now, I use a lot of audio. I was talking to a gentleman outside about, you know, the plus and the minus of keeping things in MIDI and of bouncing to audio. And I'm a real believer in just getting that stuff down on disk, because otherwise I'll just spend ages and ages deciding what do I want to do. So a lot of my projects are very, very hard audio based, and by the end of it there's no MIDI at all, because I've bounced everything down and I just find it easier to work. And a lot of people, the gentleman I was talking to included, like to use very long jams, like maybe you got a modular synthesizer or a guitar or a piano or some kind of outboard. Or maybe you're using a push and you just kind of like to get lost in it. And there's a lot to be said for that. You know, it takes a bit of time to get something you really like. So then you end up with these massive, massive, massive pieces of audio, and somewhere in there is the golden egg, but you got to kind of sit there and kind of try and find it, and it can be a bit clicky and a bit, a little bit kind of exhausting, I think. And Live 10 has got a really, really cool feature that I personally find really works kind of nicely with that. So let's just copy my drums, and let's kind of say I'm going to make a section with lots of bass effects, lots of kind of neuro, wob, 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 dubsteppy stuff. And I'm going to start constructing that. So we've got the drum beat, and here I've got an audio file, and I'm just going to go into my bass part of my collections. And I've got these long bass movements that I've chosen that I like to use a lot from various sample packs and places. So I'm just going to quickly find one. I'll drop the volume down because they're all really loud. Cool. So there's lots of workflows for doing this kind of thing. You can drop this into a sampler, you can kind of cut it up manually. But let's imagine that this is a long kind of jam that I've played. And it's all pretty random. And I'm just kind of looking for something that I like in it. So now what I can do, I can kind of chop this piece of audio into pieces to start with. And let's take this first hit. And I want to get something cool. Now, before I would have to come into this view and start moving this around and kind of live between these two views. And maybe if I'm doing automation as well, it gets kind of, very clicky, very tiring, not good on your RSI. But here, and please note that this isn't the case in automation mode. This is when automation mode isn't enabled. You can see that there's a hand that comes up when I place the mouse cursor at the top half of this audio clip. I can hold down Shift and Alt, and I can drag that clip. And as you can see at the bottom, it's scrolling through this long audio clip and find a piece that I like. And again, it's a very kind of detailed lifestyle improvement, but if you use a lot of long pieces of recording, this is an absolute lifesaver. You can really have a lot of fun. And as you can see, if I change the grid size, it will move along with the grid. So, cool, I'll take that. And let's, nah, not that one. I'll just move that around. Maybe that one, and let's go all the way to the end. And maybe I'll make the grid a bit smaller so I can get some big chunks going on. Cool, that's pretty mental, but you get the idea. So you can develop this workflow where you just kind of chop your audio into the kind of rhythm that you want, regardless of what it sounds like. And then from within your long kind of jams and or this long bass movement, you can just kind of go gigging, and you don't have to really leave focusing on your arrangement. You can really kind of move it around. Additionally, let's say this note. Oh, that's pretty cool, but let's say I don't want to use that and I'm gonna use this tiny piece. So long as the audio is warped, I can press shift and you'll notice that the icon slightly changes. It has this little arrow and I can stretch that audio out and warp it. So now, if I change that to a different mode, I can kind of maybe stretch it back again. And it can get really, really useful, especially if, you know, like me, you like to use a lot of audio. And then, of course, you can kind of take a longer piece and you can press shift and you can squash that down so it's... So yeah, you can get really creative without kind of putting your engineer hat on. You can just kind of keep dragging things around, moving stuff about. And yeah, if you like making kind of patterns like this, or indeed if you know you're making noise or electroacoustic music or whatever you're doing, it's a really nice workflow to develop to kind of get a bit more control over these massive long jams that you've recorded. But sweet. So yeah. We're kind of running out of time, so I'm going to wrap things up, but I'm just going to read out a few things that I didn't get to show you, just so you know what other functions and features are in Live 10. So something that I haven't gone into at all is the fact that Max is now inbuilt into Live. It's not a runtime, it's not a separate product, it is in Live. As you might know, Ableton bought Cycling 74 not long ago, and there's been really great collaboration between the development teams so that Max now loads really fast compared to before. It isn't restricted with things like audio inputs, so you can now work in multi-channel with Live, and that you can access your sound card through Max patches that you've built, and then yeah, work in multi-channel by using sends or yeah, just routing things out. You can route, if you're a Max programmer, you can route audio from other tracks into a track in Live, which you'll know from before you couldn't do. And so if you're into Max as well, this is excellent to have this in Live 10, because now we're getting much closer to, well, we are in a world where you can just copy and paste Max patches that you made 10 years ago and kind of add them into your projects. And it doesn't have the same kind of restrictions as before. So it's way more stable. Max loads when Live loads. So dragging and dropping Max for Live patches is just instant. It's as quick as any other device. And if, like me, you really like Max for Live, but you don't program, you know, you can just go crazy finding patches on the internet and just drag and drop them in. And there's a real kind of sense of stability and things. And they've upgraded a lot of the Max for Live things that come with Live Suite, like the LFO, you can now route it to 8 different places. So yeah, if you're into Max and Max for Live, there's some really great updates, and it just feels a lot more kind of integrated. If you have hardware synths, we can now output sysx information. So this means if you have a hardware synthesizer and you set it up and it's compatible with sysx, you can, from Max, load patches in your modular synth or your hardware synth without having to actually do it on the synthesizer. So if you've got a live set going on and you've got a lot of outboard, this is really, really cool because you can recall all of your presets and patches that you've worked on in the studio live and start tweaking on your synthesizer. So there's a really cool addition. Yeah, another little thing we didn't show, you can press R and reverse audio from the timeline. That's super handy. You can now just select stuff and press 0 to activate and deactivate it. It doesn't have to be like a clip that's cut already. If I was to, say, resample this, you can now see it's time-stamped the file I just made. So I just press Command J to kind of bounce in place, as it were. But every time Live makes an audio file now, it timestamps it. Why is that cool? Well, maybe you remember what day you made something on, but you don't really remember where you put it. So you can just go into Finder and search for the date. Boom, you're going to find your audio file much, much quicker than going through, different folders. And if you're not so organized like me, this is killer. Yeah, we have true stereo panning. We can take this and enable select split stereo pan mode. So now we have left control and right control, and that's been on the request list for a long time. And yeah, also Z will zoom in and Shift Z zooms out. Also, if you have a trackpad, holding down Command and scrolling up and down zooms in and out. Might seem minor, but man, it's so nice to just yeah, go in and out of your views that way. Yeah, that's about it for me. There's a whole bunch of other stuff, and you can have a look at that on the live website. And yeah, it's currently in public beta, so you can all give that a try out and join the beta program if you have a copy of Live 9. And then at the moment, there's a bit of a discount on if you want to upgrade, so you can pay to upgrade now, and then that will be a little bit cheaper than if you do it in the future when it's released as a public release. And yeah, you'll have access to the beta and then instant access to the big picture when that does come out, which should be in the first quarter of this year. So cool. Thanks all for your attention. I know I've been talking at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and this has been like an hour full of information and this dude rambling in English. So thanks for your attention. There's been a lot to get through, and yeah, we more or less did that in time. So awesome. If you've got any questions about it, you can talk to me, you can talk to Jesper, we can kind of have a look at some other stuff, and I really encourage you to go sign up for the beta, check it out, and enjoy all the packs and things that come with it, because it's, I guess I would say it, but I really do mean it. It's really a fantastic upgrade, and it's made my music making a lot more streamlined and basically a lot more fun. So cool. We're going to take a little break. I'm going to grab a beer. I'm sure some of you will too. And then after that, we're going to be doing a competition where one of you can win a license and the runners-up can win some tickets to some awesome concerts here at Radar and some goodies. You'll also notice there's a whole bunch of swag bags, stickers and things all over the place. They're yours. Grab them, take them home. That's all on the house from Futureware. And yeah, we'll see you in a little bit for the competition and later on a jam. So thanks everybody, and killer, I'll catch you soon.